Im Vorfeld der Agritechnica im Jahr 2009.
In the run-up to AGRITECHNICA in 2009, dark clouds were already gathering with the brief but severe global economic crisis. Nevertheless, Fendt's appearance in Hall 9 was fresh and spectacular for the market and technology leader, with the Fendt 211 Vario in a special gold paint finish catching the eye. Herbert, what was so special about this model?
Well, first of all, the special feature was, of course, the paintwork, the gold paintwork, which was designed to be eye-catching. But on the other hand, there were two events. On the one hand, it was the 100,000th Vario produced since the Favorit 926 was unveiled at AGRITECHNICA in 1995. And on the other hand, it was of course a milestone in the development of the Vario transmission, because the 200 series, i.e. the standard tractors of the 200 series, was the last series at Fendt to be converted to Vario transmission. From that point on, Fendt tractors were only available with Vario transmissions. This meant that the good old tried and tested synchronous transmission and manual transmission at Fendt had served their purpose.
Who was this model intended for? What kind of customer base?
I think this 200S, this small tractor, was the go-to tractor for home and farm use. But above all, it was popular in the Alpine regions, such as in our neighboring countries Austria and Switzerland. It was later also called the Alpine Vario, because the Vario transmission made starting on hills particularly easy. And what was special about the tractor, apart from the transmission, was of course the engine we installed at the time. The 200 Vario used to be equipped with an air-cooled Deutz engine, and this was the first time a three-cylinder engine was used. However, that wasn't entirely straightforward, because the three-cylinder engine wasn't very popular. But a common rail engine was developed from the company's own engine, which ultimately had GTI characteristics. The result was a really lively, agile, maneuverable tractor. And once customers had driven it, the matter was settled, and it became a big hit.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just in Germany, but also across Europe and worldwide that it found its way.
Yes, it found its way everywhere and was well received everywhere. Another special feature of the tractor was that we had designed it to be easy to operate, so that older people, or those who were not so experienced with electronics, could also drive it easily. So a drive lever in the golf ball design, that wasn't to everyone's taste, but it proved its worth and customers loved it too.
Back to the Vario transmission. In the end, actually 100%, of all tractors manufactured in Marktoberdorf in all performance classes had the Vario transmission. That was a unique strategy.
Yes, that was the case. At the turn of the millennium, the question was how to proceed with the Vario transmission in tractors with lower power ratings. That was, of course, a very difficult issue because there was no solution in terms of cost. But nevertheless, a solution was found for narrow-track tractors. And based on this narrow-track tractor, Vario transmissions could then also be implemented in the lower power classes. At that time, there was no competitor whatsoever that offered continuously variable transmissions in this power class. That was very unique. And Fendt succeeded in converting its entire tractor fleet from manual transmissions to continuously variable transmissions within just 14 years. That was a very special achievement.
How did you convince the Americans that this was the right way to go?
Yes, it wasn't easy, of course, because our American board members weren't so keen on investing in small tractors. They only ever wanted big tractors, big toys for big boys, with Fendt in any case. And that took a while, but when AGCO got a German CEO in Martin Rischenhagen, he was enthusiastic about it, and then it was no longer an issue, and we were able to implement this project here.
That was indeed an important milestone in Fendt's history. The 200 series was the last series to be equipped with a Fendt Vario transmission, presented at Agri Technica in 2009 and still in production today. A very successful model.
We can still add that. So from then on, there was a similar advertising slogan, another similar advertising slogan that said, "Are you driving or are you still shifting gears?"
That was brilliant, of course, and we were then able to get more and more customers excited about this technology.
And later, for the entire automation of agricultural technology and farming, i.e. with tractors and equipment, the continuously variable transmission is of course the ideal prerequisite for this. Yes, as we can see today, the Vario transmission was the 100,000th at the time. And when you look at how it has developed and at what speed it has developed, and how we see it today, there is not a single competitor that can offer continuously variable transmissions from 50 to 500 horsepower. And that is, of course, unique in tractor technology.
Exactly. And that was basically laid the foundation with the 100,000 and 100% Vario back then.
That's how we did it all, even with the narrow track tractors, and many thought it would never work in the low power ranges. But as you can see, it worked well, and we found great solutions, and that has remained the case to this day.
Herbert, how did the development of a Vario transmission in this lower power range come about in the first place?
Well, that was a very interesting story. We started with transmissions in the upper performance range, beginning with the 900, 700, and 400, and then there was always the desire to get the Vario transmission into the lower performance ranges. And the big issue was the cost. And that was always a back and forth. Then one day, the lead engineer from the transmission department, Richard Heinel, came to me and said he had a suggestion for a narrow-track tractor transmission. I took a look at it, and it was really an ingenious suggestion. A small tractor doesn't drive at 50 kilometers per hour, it only drives at 40 kilometers per hour. This meant that some parts could be omitted, and it was very compact, so that the transmission could practically be moved into the rear axle. And you could also remove the transmission tunnel in the cab. I was so enthusiastic about the idea that I naturally presented it to the board of directors very quickly. The head of development was also enthusiastic, but the rest of the board members from the US were less enthusiastic. They really only wanted to invest in large tractors. We weren't allowed to continue right away, but I kept working on it behind the scenes. We were basically doing it on the sly, and thank God we didn't stop. This concept then led to the development of the transmission for the 300 Vario, which was launched several years ago. And then when Martin Riechenhagen came on board as CEO, we showed him the concept, and he was immediately enthusiastic and approved the investment right away, so that we were able to introduce the narrow track tractors with Vario transmissions in the spring of 2009. And from this transmission, a derivative was developed for the 200S as a standard tractor. And as you can see, thank God that's how it turned out. So a really great development in this area.
Sometimes you need a little patience and a little time.
Yes, and sometimes you also have to dare to do something.